History Chapter 2, From Trade to Territory. And this is a mind map to summarize what we are going to study in this chapter. The mind map starts from here, that how the East India Company comes east, that is how it comes to India, how it begins trading in Bengal. We will see how they started having battles over here. We will read in particular two battles, the Battle of Plassey, the Battle of Buxar. We will see how their lifestyle was, and we will talk about their relation with the tiger of Mysore, who is called as Tipu Sultan. So majorly, these are some pointers that we are going to cover up in this chapter. So let's start the concept by understanding that how the East India Company came into India and how they started having a foothold over here. Because you must be aware, the EIC, when they started coming up in India, they did not come up all of a sudden. There was a very major rule which was going on previously, and it was the Mughal Empire, the very powerful Mughal Empire who had captured so many parts of India, and they were having a very strong foothold in India. Now, if the Mughal Empire was so strong and determined, how could they take over how could they not prevent the Britishers to come into India? The Mughal Empire, they were having a very strong foothold in India. But what was happening, that we had a very strong Mughal emperor who was Aurangzeb. So the last Mughal emperor, the powerful Mughal ruler that we can think about is Aurangzeb. So when Aurangzeb was ruling, he was taking good care of the military power, the administration. But once he passed away in 1707, the empire literally broke down. The governors who were there, the zamindars and the subedars, they took control over the authority. There were Mughal rulers after him, but they could not keep the rule intact. They could not keep the strong foothold holding intact like that what Aurangzeb had kept. So now when the powerful regional kingdoms came up, so basically the entire India that the Mughal Empire had captured was now being broken down into further regional kingdoms. So obviously when the power is divided, you cannot expect that they will remain so powerful, because now everybody was divided into smaller and smaller regions, right? So the entire India got divided, and divided, when we are divided, we cannot take over our power. We become powerless in that scenario. And hence, Delhi, which was the center of the Mughal Empire, it was not anymore an effective center. So you can see over here, this picture shows how Bahadur Shah Zafar, he was the last Mughal emperor, and he was taken up by the Britishers. He was a very good leader, but he was not able to keep up the Mughal rule in a very strong position. So Bahadur Shah Zafar was actually forced to leave the kingdom, and his sons were actually shot over there. So this is how the Mughal Empire came to an end, and that marked the beginning of the English East India Company. So now, when this is just the beginning of the era, how did the British imperialism start? So how did the British basically come into India, and how did they start having their control over it? So the answer is that the British East India Company, they came and set it up their trading post. So they didn't come to just rule over India. They didn't want administrative control in the beginning. In the beginning, they just wanted to have their trading post over here. So they wanted to come in as a trader. They knew that India had a lot of things that Britishers wanted. It was in European demand, and they knew India was a very rich country. And it was that thought that they realized that yes, we can make our profits by having a trade relation with India. But then you have to understand, they are working for a profit motive. They will not look into the welfare of the Indians, and that is what they did. So they came in 1600s and they set up their trading post in India. So whatever, they took up Bengal, the region of Bengal, Madras, Bombay. So all these were the port towns that they had set up their ports over there, and they were trying to trade with the Indians. So the Indian government, basically, which means the Mughal Empire, they also kept the trading, but it was under the control over there. When the Mughal Empire began to collapse, then the British East India Company thought that this is a good chance to, take over the administration also. So initially they did not want to take the administrative control, but then later on, when the Mughal Empire just kept on breaking down into smaller fragments, they felt that it was the right time to take control of it. And that what happened over here. So when the East India Company came into in the 1600 AD, they got the Royal Charter. So what is this Royal Charter? So the Queen Elizabeth at that point of time, she gave this Royal Charter to the European East India Company. According to this charter, it meant that no other trading group in England could compete with the EIC. So it was giving them the sole right to have that trade relationship with India. And this sole right is actually given a new term, which is called monopoly. You should know this term because they got the monopoly. Monopoly means where you are having only a single ruler, okay, who's taking control of everything. But it was not so. They could not take a monopoly in the initial stage of this trade, because even though they had this royal charter, but there were other trading companies who also tried to come into India. There were Portuguese, the Dutch, the French. They were all coming in one by one and trying to set up their trading routes with India. They also had their ports and they were trying to take over some parts where they could take up their trading routes. So this is how the East India Company fought to get into India as a trader. And what was the main agenda? They just wanted to trade. They knew they could take the cotton from here because cotton was in huge demand in their own country, right? So spices, again, very crucial, right? We are known for our spices. So they wanted to take all these things from India. In that scenario, they had to also compete with the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French. So it was not an easy task for them. Now, when the trade began, the EIC had to take care of certain things. Because I told you, it was not a very easy task for them to set up their trading route also. There was a lot of competition. So when they came to India, they were very much fascinated by the fine quality of silk, the pepper, clove, cardamom, cinnamon, all these things were in demand in Europe. And they thought that this is the best place that they can take it up from here, and they used to trade it to their own country. But then, although this was on their agenda, but it was very difficult for them to keep up with the competition. Where is this competition coming from? It was from the other companies who were coming in, the other European companies, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, right? And when there is competition, they are all willing to buy all these goods. So what will happen? There will be increase in the prices. The Indians trader, they would be feeling that, okay, my goods are in demand, so I will increase the price, right? What will happen when the price is increased? The profit will be lower for them. What is the relation? That is, imagine you are the only one who has little bit of water left in your water bottle in the last period of your class. Okay, and everybody is thirsty. You come back from your the physical education class and you're all very thirsty, and you say, okay, I will trade my water with the person who is going to give me the notes for history chapter. Okay, so you can set a very high price for it, that the person has to write the entire notes for you. That's a very huge price, right? So what is happening when you are trading your good with the other good and you think that their prices are increasing? You have to pay a very high price as a producer. So what would happen? Your profits will decrease. Okay, so the East India Company was facing the problem that the profits were lower because there was so much competition and everybody wanted to buy all the silk, pepper, clove, cardamom. So that's why they were facing the high competition, which made their profits lower. If you are the only person who is having that water, you can ask anything from your friend, whatever you ask for. But imagine that there is another person in the class who also has water left in his bottle. Then whatever you are seeking for, you might not be able to get that, right? because the other person might be willing to trade it for a lesser price. So that is how competition comes in. When you have more people, the competition is higher, okay, and your chances of getting higher profits will be lower. So given that, the East India Company thought that this is not going to work out for us. If we have to get lesser price, we are not getting the profit, then what is the purpose of having this trade? We have to be earning profits. So they thought that the only way that they could survive is to eliminate the rivals. That is, take away the rivals. They should not be trading with India. And that's where battles started. So initially, they were fighting with the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French companies, right? So they were fighting amongst themselves. All the company people, they were fighting amongst themselves. They were blowing up their ships. So basically, the trade was carried out with arms, okay, and fortification. Two major things. Arms, because they had to keep on fighting the wars. So if they were trading, they were blowing their ships, they were docketing their routes, okay. So the trade was carried out with arms, and the trading posts were actually protected through fortification. What does fortification mean? That they were creating their areas as bounded, that nobody else could come in. So they were trying to protect their own trading routes. So this is the way that the trading routes were set up, and the East India Company had tried to take over the sole monopoly of trading in with the Indian. Now, when the East India Company, they got the sole rights and they were trading, the first factory that they had set up, it was near the Hooghly River in 1651. And that is where they started trading. Remember, Howrah Bridge, all these places, just by looking at the pictures, you'll be able to understand that we are talking about Bengal over here. So Bengal was the area where the factory was set up. The traders, the company traders, they were given a special name. They were called as factors. Okay, so they were called as the factors. So the factory was actually a warehouse for them. They were keeping all the goods that had to be exported, right? So they were maintaining all the stocks in the factory. This is how a factory used to look like in those times. And all the other forts had started coming up near these areas. Now, they persuaded the Mughal Emperor to issue the Farman. Who is they? We are talking about the English East India Company. So what happened? The company, they wanted more and more people, the more and more the facilities being given to them. So they kept on persuading the Emperor Aurangzeb at that point of time. And they persuaded to issue them a Farman. Farman is a royal order. So they wanted a royal order in which they will say that, the English East India Company has the sole right to trade over India and all. So all that was supposed to be mentioned into the royal Farman that we're talking about. But this was not it. When you get something, you want more and more of it. You are never satisfied as a human being. That's what happened with the East India Company. They kept on pressing for more and more privileges. They never were satisfied with whatever the Indians were giving them. They went to the extent of saying that they wanted a duty-free trading route. Duty-free means whenever you are trading with one nation, you have to pay a tax to them, right? Because you are taking the goods from them, you are doing export, you're going to earn money from your country. So what is happening? You have to pay a tax on the goods that you are going to take away from a particular nation. That's called a duty tax. But the company, they refused to pay this tax. They said, we are not going to pay you this tax anymore. So they had their own private routes apart from what they had set up in Bengal, the official one. They got some other routes also by which they started entering into India, and they were not paying the taxes over there. If the country is not getting the tax, what would happen? Just think of the current times also. If we are not paying the taxes, what would happen? We will not be able to, the government will not get the money. The government earns the revenue from our taxes. So the government will not have the money. If the government does not have the money, they will not be able to do their expenditure. They are building up roads, they are building infrastructure for us, taking care of poverty, illiteracy. All these social things will not happen. So this is what the problem arises in Bengal also. So Bengal lost its the Bengal was not able to get the revenue because the company had denied paying the taxes. Now, when the company was asking for more and more, the Indian rulers, they were sure that they were not going to give all these rights to the English East India Company. So what happened? It became a very serious issue because there were a lot of conflicts happening. How did that happen? So in the early 18th century, the conflicts between the company and the Nawabs of Bengal, it intensified, it increased over the time. So when Aurangzeb was put on to death, what happened? That the Bengal Nawabs, they got their power. So the Nawabs became more and more powerful after the emperor got, he left his rule. And then the regional powers came up. This is what we had talked about in the first concept only, that how the region of Mughal Empire, they got broken down into smaller and smaller regional powers. So first ruler of Bengal was Nawab Murshid Quli Khan. He was taken up by the rule of Alivardi Khan, and Alivardi Khan was taken up over by Sirajud-Daulah. So one after the other, they were very strong Nawabs, no doubt, but they kept on having their voicings with the East India Company. So the Nawab said that the company was not following the rules and regulation. So the Nawabs did not grant the company the concessions that they were asking for. They accused the company for deceit. So they said the company is not following the rules and they are trying to deceive us by not paying the taxes. So that is how they are not following our rules and regulations. So they are trying to deceive us in that scenario. So in that case, the Nawab said, we will going to deny them the right to mint the coins and not to have any more fortification. So they cannot make their own coins anymore and they will not have any kind of forts to build up. So they claimed that the company was actually not paying the taxes and they were also writing disrespectful letters to humiliate the Nawabs. So they did not feel that the Nawabs were good enough to rule over the area and they were not trying to give them the respect. So the Nawabs felt all these points were going against what they had thought the Britishers to be. So this was a problem. On the other hand, the company said that whatever these Nawabs are saying, it's completely unjust. They are creating these hue and cry that we are not paying the taxes, but this is not so. We are paying the taxes, but the taxes are so high that we won't be able to afford that. This is what the company claimed. Okay. So on one hand, the Nawab of Bengal, they were having their views that the company was being deceitful and they were not giving the respect to them. Whereas the company said that their demands was just unjust. We are not going to fulfill all that the Nawabs are saying and we will trade only if the duties are removed for us completely. So they did not want any kind of taxes. They said that we want to trade but without any kind of taxes to be held on us. This is how the conflict began between the Nawab and the company. So we have the Nawab Murshid Quli Khan who first protested against the company rule and then he had his successors Alivardi Khan and Sirajud-Daulah who again forced the company to pay the taxes, but the company said we will not pay any taxes over here, okay, and we will continue only if you give us the space that we can expand our settlement, take up the forts. So they wanted a full control over the forts that they were having. So this conflict between the Nawabs and the East India Company led to the culmination of conflicts, which ultimately led to a very famous battle, the Battle of Plassey. We will continue with the Battle of Plassey in the next video, and I hope you were able to understand how the East India Company came into India. Did they come in as a trader or did they come in as an administrator?